Hello, it's Imogen and Shay here for the next in our, I guess, series of conversations. But this uh, week's topic, it comes from something Shay said to me recently, which is that she doesn't want to regulate her own nervous system, which seems kind of shocking in the context of everything we talk about, and we co-teach a class, um, perhaps on how to regulate your own nervous system, but maybe that's not exactly it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I think really that first question is, you talk about the importance of having a regulated nervous system. We teach this course devoted to it. So can you explain what you mean when you say you don't want to regulate it, or you don't want to regulate your nervous system?
Mm-hmm. I want a regulated nervous system. I want my nervous system to be able to regulate itself. I don't want to make it regulate. In fact, I really can't. If I try to force my nervous system to regulate, it's going to cause problems because that's just not how the body works. I can do things to support it, and those will likely help it regulate, but I can't
So,
the outcome.
so you can do things that can help create the conditions and the environment in which you can have a more regulated nervous system, but you don't kind of overtly control it, and you can't tell your nervous system to regulate
Yes.
right now.
Yeah. Yeah. In our work, I've encountered some people who've said things along the lines of, if once I get my nervous system regulated, things will be good. Like it's a goal that's accomplished and that's it. Which is the farthest thing from the truth. It's our nervous systems naturally and normally fluctuate all day, every day, depending on largely the input from our environment, sensory, psychosocial, even physical, all have effects on what's happening inside us and our internal state.
So, to be devil's advocate, if you are in a pretty good place, you've learned some things that support you having a regulated nervous system, you're experiencing that more and more often in your life, you've created or have, or lucky enough to have a supportive environment and friends and, social situations, work that you're in. Is it not true that then if something comes up that is very dysregulating, you're in a better place to deal with it, and that your nervous system maybe won't get really far, or it's less likely to go kind of really into kind of overactive. I don't know what's the correct word that I'm looking at.
Like extreme dysregulation. Yeah.
Extreme dysregulation. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, if you have all that, those inner and outer resources, like you described, that support a regulated nervous system, you have moment to moment in your life, every day, you have experience having a nervous system that's regulating itself. So that builds the capacity for it. And then when you do get dysregulated, you're either dysregulated less and for a shorter period of time, and you can more easily come back into a regulated state.
So obviously this all depends on what the circumstances and situation is that you're dealing
that's
with.
The thing, it changes moment to moment. You could get a phone call that changes your life forever, and that's going to really dysregulate you, no matter how much support you have.
So we teach practices that help. We may need to change how we word things on our promotional material. So I was going to say we teach practices that help people regulate their nervous system. But maybe if I was being more precise, is help people support
their nervous
themselves,
system, right?
support their nervous system. But so this could be saying this is just like semantics. So, but I think there's like an important distinction. Why do you think this distinction is really important?
Because we don't really have control over our nervous systems. We cannot control them. They actually pretty much control us. Yes, we can do things. We can make choices in the moment, and we can have practices and regular habits and so on. But the nervous system is going to respond to all that. However it responds. If I had control over my nervous system, I probably wouldn't freeze and collapse when I feel, threatened. And
we want a nervous system, I shouldn't say, I certainly want a nervous system that is able to respond to threat appropriately. And it could be to freeze and collapse depending on the circumstances. However, if you've experienced a lot of trauma or stress even, that we may go more into that when it's not a threat that warrants it.
We can become sensitized to threats. So for me, having basically all of my problems go back to being abused by caregivers I should have been able to trust to help me and take care of me, mostly men. So when I'm in a situation where I feel threatened by a man, even though it's not like a physical threat, even if he's just not treating me like a human being, like that one doctor I told you about, my nervous system is trained to freeze and collapse. And as much work as I've done in the past 5 years to change that, I didn't freeze and collapse in this state. I was actually able to process cognitively and go, oh, this guy's being a jerk. He's trying to rip me off. I can't trust him with a hangnail. But
you had your reason. You had some reasoning there. So
so that's a big change. But if I could have controlled my nervous system at that point, what I feel would be really appropriate would have been to tell him off. How dare you exploit people who are vulnerable just because, and give him like 50 words that would change his life forever. But I couldn't. I may write him a letter later, but I can't control what my nervous system does. And I have tools that can help me not be driven by the trauma and fear that's still in me. Like the time that we've talked about when I had to go to the surgical center for a procedure at the hospital where I've been harmed. And I was ready to run out of the place. And because of these practices, I could find enough safety to actually stay there. Without it, I would have split. And I really needed the procedure. So it was great to have these practices to help me regulate just enough. Give my nervous system what it needed to regulate enough to navigate that day.
So when we talk about these practices, we're talking about practices that come out of my Alexander technique work that we teach in our classes. And so they're tools to help you. So what were you doing in that situation when you were using a practice? Because using your words, you weren't regulating your nervous system, but you were doing something that did help your nervous system. So
I actually did two things. I started with as soon as I walked in, I just dissociated. My heart went crazy, and I felt like I needed to run out. And but I was able to pause because I've practiced and practiced and practiced. And the pause is probably the number one most important technique for giving your nervous system what it needs. I paused and I said, well, I can't say that I feel safe here, but do I see any apparent immediate threat? And I looked around at all the people, talking on the phone and working on their phone and reading a magazine. And I could honestly tell myself there is no obvious immediate threat here. And that was enough a break for my nervous system to be able to stay there. And then I found a place to sit and just started doing the cycle over and over and over again. We count on the fingers, and that helps me to stay focused. And I would lose count and just start over again. And that was enough to keep me there. And then I got the procedure I needed, and that helped me feel better.
Yes, so I'm just thinking about that. It's the kind of foundational, most basic practice that we teach is this holding the fingers and the certain way of thinking. So in that situation, it helped you be calm enough to stay and be present. But in another situation, which is not as threatening and challenging for you, you could experience much more ease. And so it depends on what is happening, what is going to happen with that process. You can't expect to feel like you're, at your most easeful in this.
Yes, and if I just do the cycle one time, it's going to regulate my nervous system, and I'll
forever
everything right. Yeah, no, well, it's true what you said. Recently, I had another dental appointment, and there was some drilling without anesthetic because it was shallow, and I'd rather, and it was a little painful. And that pain, it's a difficult pain. It's very sharp, and it's right there in your head too. So I did the cycle, and it didn't make it hurt less, but it made the experience more pleasant, more
tolerable is the word that was coming to me.
Tolerable. And so that was a very different situation than at the surgical center. I know this doctor. I know his office. Nobody there has ever hurt me or harmed me or even been rude to me. So I feel very safe there. And so, the experience of practicing the cycle and how it affected my nervous system was quite different.
So it's kind of about trusting the process of some of these practices rather than controlling what happens.
And I think that's an important thing to understand, that our nervous systems are in process all the time. And I just lost it. Sorry.
Trusting the process.
And we have to trust that process, that our bodies know what we need. When we're fatigued, there's a reason.
Right.
We don't get angry at the fatigue, and we do. We go, oh God, I'm so fatigued. I'm guilty of this myself. I'm so fatigued. The fatigue, I hate it. But that's my body saying, I don't have enough for this. Give me a break.
Yeah. And I, in our classes, one of the things we help people with is kind of being able to tune in and listen and be aware, like you say, the pause being key, but it's not just like this empty pause. It's a pause for awareness, for choice, for,
for noticing what's happening.
For noticing what's happening. Yeah.
And only then, like so much of the time is in our culture, especially for those of us who've been, had severe trauma, we're always running into the future. We're always like you call it end gaining. Like we want to have this done. We want to get through this. And the pause, when we're doing that, we are either afraid of what might happen or reacting to what already did happen. And when we pause, we can be in the moment, and only then can we respond to what's actually happening right now, rather than what we're afraid of.
Right. And I think probably every human being could relate to that. I think from what you're describing, for trauma survivors, it's much more, I don't know what the word is, but much more. But I think everyone can relate to either being over there into whatever's next, or next in the next minute, or in the next year, or in the next day, or worrying about or what happened before, or rather than being here now. And here now is really the only moment we've got.
Well, and I think people can identify with that, and most people aren't aware how often they are in the past or the future, not being present.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even now, I want to be present and listen to you and respond to you. But it's so easy to get caught up in, oh, what is my next point? What's the next question? What do I want to reply?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a back and forth all day long. And in some ways, that reminds me of a regulated nervous system. A regulated nervous system doesn't mean you're just at this kind of calm place all day long.
Right.
It means that you ebb and flow, and you can easily come back to more balance without it going too far either way.
Right. Or
So,
getting stuck in
yeah.
hypervigilance or hypovigilance.
So I guess kind of presence is never within. In my personal experience, I've never been able to just stay present, but I can keep coming back to presence and not get so far away from it that I kind of lose the present moment.
Right. And that's really the trick. It's that sustained condition of stress. That's the problem. Our bodies are meant to handle stress. We're meant to run from lions and to climb trees to escape bears or whatever. But not.
I don't think I'd have much luck with either of those.
I know, not anymore. but not all day, every day,
right?
And especially not from our own kind, and that's where most trauma comes from, interpersonal, and that's part of what makes it so harmful.
Yeah. I'm just going to check my notes to see if there are any other points that you really wanted to make about this.
Better check your notes too. I didn't even print them out.
Yeah. So for me, I just think a key point is that we can't, and we probably don't want to, if we really understand, control our nervous system to regulate it. But it's learning ways, like practices. But I think the more that you're tuned in, that then you can set up your environment more. You can be more conscious about friends that you realize that are healthy for your nervous system or not so healthy, and then you can choose who you spend more time with, and things like that.
That's actually one of the hardest aspects of this work for me, because as a child, my life was a relational desert. I didn't have adults who were safe connections for most of my childhood, and so I developed the attachment style that people get when their parent is a source of threat, which means I'm desperate for attention, but I'm also terrified of it, equally terrified. And these are 200 and 300-year-old, million-year-old impulses. And they're fighting each other. So for me, and in my family, I was taught family, what was the saying? Your friends will abandon you, but you always have your family, which was a bald-faced lie. But
probably not what you want.
But that indoctrination is still in me, even after all these years of working to change those neural pathways. My tendency is to hold on to a relationship even after it's clear that it's harmful or dysregulating. And the more I do this work, the more I realize how important it is to let go. This is the one place where just let it go can apply to trauma. Let go of the things that stress you as much as you possibly can. And that includes the people, even family members. I've had to really set new boundaries with family members because they are largely, trauma bound themselves, and they can't see me or recognize who I am. And they think, I'm crazy or, whatever. I don't even know. It doesn't matter what they think. What matters is how they treat me. And that's what determines who gets to stay in my life. And it's still very hard, with family members that I've been close to and felt like I was close to most of my life. And now I have to go, whoa, wait, I don't know what changed or why. I don't have control over that, but they are being abusive and I need to set this boundary. And at the same time, it's so liberating. I'm like, oh, now I don't have to deal with that person anymore. I have more room for, my new neighbor who's really nice.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like part of having a nervous system that is more regulated a little bit more often also helps you, and this kind of pause, it's all part of the same thing, helps you be more discerning, helps you notice what happens to me when so we can, our own nervous system can be our barometer. I mean, I'm not saying that we should maybe believe it 100% because old patterns, which might not be relevant to what's the current situation, but it's a really useful thing. And I know that you're using this in kind of choosing providers as well as in the medical.
Yes.
Because that's really key, having been harmed so much in that environment, that you need to be absolutely sure of who
being treated
are.
With respect. Dr. Dan Siegel says empathy is not optional in our relationships, and he means that for any relationship, and I agree. And that's become, the bottom line for me. If the other person can't have empathy for me, there's no meaningful place for them in my life. And for me as a trauma survivor, especially with medical PTSD, that's an absolute requirement for medical professionals. If they don't have that, they're going to cause harm no matter what they could offer. Even if they offered me the procedure that could fix my nervous system forever, I couldn't go to them because I couldn't trust them, because they can't see me as a human being.
You might not be able to trust them because that doesn't exist to my knowledge either. Anyway, I think we should be kind of wrapping things up, but just to come back to our kind of main topic of this idea of not controlling, not regulating your nervous system yourself. However, you can do things that support your nervous system, both kind of practices and things that you do yourself, so using your inner resources, but you can also hopefully be more thoughtful,
selective
in your environment. For your environment. Just little tweaks can make, you might be a lot that's out of your control, but even the small thing can sometimes make a big difference.
Even one moment of pause and making a mindful, present decision can change things for you in that just in that moment, but it will have lingering effects too most of the time. The main thing I want to get across is that our nervous systems are naturally and normally oriented toward regulation, wholeness, integration, being friendly and open and connected. And so the question really is, what are the impediments? What is impeding the regulation, my nervous system, from its capacity to...
how can you get rid of the things that are impeding the regulation? And that is so in line with my Alexander technique background, and a key principle, which is kind of subtracting what's unnecessary. Alexander teacher Mio Morales talks about ease being our natural state, and it's everything that gets on top of it. And that sounds exactly, just using different words.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
When you're integrated, saying. You have ease. Yeah. You move and live with ease. Yes. Yeah. Isn't that fascinating? And that's the whole reason that I got so excited about working with you, is that the more I got into this work, the more I realized this is just so in line with neuroscience that it's really exciting.
It is exciting. Um, so I think it's time to finish up. We hope that you get excited with us
Not regulating your
uh,
nervous system.
about regulating your nervous system, ease, neuroscience. But one thing you said right at the end, which I think is leading to another conversation we're having soon, is like you said something about just a small moment can. And we want to talk about the idea of glimmers. So I'm giving you a glimmer of what's coming next, which is glimmers. You'll find out more
It's a wonderful
next
topic.
time
Yeah.
we talk.
I like it.
All right. Thank you so much, Shay.
Thank you, Imogen.
And yes, you're welcome.